Hi, I'm the Nomad Producer with StartProducingMusic.com, and today I want to share with you my mixing template. A template is nothing but a saved format that you can custom to your taste, and over the years I found that no matter what field of art I got to lay my hands on, whether it's carpentry or working with metals or whatnot, workflow is always the thing that stood out between masters and amateurs. And so a few years ago I started developing my own mixing template in search of a workflow that makes sense to me and kind of gives me my own digital console. And although this is very much over the top and very complicated, this can be simplified, and this is more for you to take ideas you like and implement them in your workflow. I'm going to show this on Pro Tools, but this can be used on any DAW, and what I want you to notice is the approach and the logic behind what it is that I've done. So before I actually explain what it is that you're seeing on my screen, I want to explain the logic behind this design. The first is funneling down large sections into fewer buses as possible. The second is to create an easy and fast workflow. And the third and maybe most important one is to make myself think and feel and decide what it is that I want to do and not go for kind of go-tos. Let me explain. These are the sections of the song. You can see drums, bass, guitars, harmony, which is synths and Rhodes, pianos, whatever, strings, which I also use brass for, backing vocals, and vocals. Each section of the song has its own set of effects. Reverb bvox, delay bvox, widener bvox. Strings, same. Reverb, delay, widener. Harmony has more. We have reverb long, reverb short, delay short, and a widener. Now you might have noticed that all the plugins here are disabled. This is what I meant with making myself think. I've just inserted a wide palette of effects. I even have more. I'll open these. I kind of go through and think to myself, okay, maybe the 140 will suit this thing. I'm a click away from it. And if the BX20 will suit it better, so be it. I really don't like the fact that things are just open for every mix and you don't really custom tailor stuff. So this makes me think and go through artistic processes. Now, if, for an example, I really like the reverb I've inserted on the harmony channel, and I think it'll suit perfectly the string section, I just drag it. But again, I went through this decision-making process. I'm not just going on neutral and actively decide what it is that I'm doing on this mix. Let's now go through the sections because each has something a bit unique about it. The drums are obviously the most extreme folder that I'll open because drums are the hardest to mix. And here we go. Everything you see, I think more than a dozen channels are either used for routing or for triggering or for effects. I have two trigger plugins ready to go, both the Slate one and the UVI one, which I love, that if I need I use, and then usually I will get either one or two or even three bass drum channels. So I insert them here, and then I have 5 channels summed down to this one bass drum channel. I also have a bass drum parallel here with, again, disabled plugins that I sometimes use for parallel processing. Same goes to the snare. I might have 2 or 3 snare channels coming for a mix, 2 triggers that all sum down to the snare bus. And then once I have a balance I like, I just use this one fader instead of constantly changing and losing my head. My control over the session is what will enable me to mix faster and be more artistic and intuitive. Again, snare parallel, and then the set of effects, long reverb, short reverb, long delay, short delay, and a widener, which I only use if they're needed, and all the sends are already on the buses, so it's an easy kind of activate, send, and moving on forward. Inside the drum folder, I have a few parallel processors. There are these UAD plugins. There's the API 2500, 33609, and a Fatso, which aren't disabled because when you engage a UAD plugin, there's latency involved and it's a nightmare. So I want to keep my phase in check, so these are already inserted. I also have Brainworks Townhouse compressor available if I want it. If I feel like I want anything else, I'll use it. I won't use all of them, but maybe it will work. You'll see something like this further down the road. The next parallel compressor is the TG, the Zener in this case, which is a compressor with a very unique and specific tone, which is a part of my template because I used to work in a studio that had this parallel to the drums as a default. I'm just used to the sound of it, so I have it in my digital mixing as well. Next up, a parallel distortion. You might have seen my video covering the rocker gain by Brainworks. The settings I've dialed there I really liked, so I just kept kept it in my template, but it's not necessarily what I'll use. I have a decapitator here, a Red 37 by Waves, and even more plugins here if I want them. If you have seen that video, you know that when I parallel distort, I have pre-distortion EQ and post-distortion EQ, and I use the low and high cuts and also the phase flip button to control the phase relationships of the distorted channel with the original channels. It's really, really important and powerful, and I highly recommend you go see that in my video. Lastly, the Devil-Lock, which is the only one that's in mono, which is designated only for the bass drum and the snare. I sometimes send them to it just to get more snap, very, very violent saturation and distortion. It's really important for me to note that although I have a lot of options available, it's not things that I necessarily use. They're just there because I noticed I did use them constantly over the course of a few mixes. Complexity is not the goal with this mixing template as much as speed and intuition are. So this is what we have here. All these sum down to this channel, but if you look into the I/O, you can see that these two channels also have the same input routing and have a different plugin on their insert. Recently, I fell in love with parallel processing. It really is mind-blowing to me, and you'll see this come up throughout my mixing template a few times. First channel, I have the 33609 compressor, which is a classic compressor for drums, 1.5 ratio, you know, it's pretty subtle. This channel has the Shadow Hills compressor, which is also beautiful on drums, and the third one has the SSL bus compressor. Once I have somewhat of a direction here, I'll just create a balance between these three. I'll play around until I find something I like. Sometimes I'll stick with the original one. I don't really have rules with how I approach this. This is just an option. Maybe I'll just heavily compress here and have this one a bit more gentle, and it's really easy and fast for me to already have this in my template and not have to open a new channel and route it and insert on it. I noticed I've done this a few times, so I insert it into my template. Next up, the bass. I sometimes do this trick and sometimes don't. This is a trick I learned from Michael Brower's either videos or from my visit. I have one channel filtering all the high frequencies and compressed slightly by the LA2A, and then a high channel which cuts from the same frequencies upwards, and then I have the option to either distort only the high channel and have the low frequencies just balanced and clean, or any other variation. This is something that I use when I feel like the low frequencies aren't really in check, but generally speaking, I do as much as I can to keep phases. It really helps when you need it, but if I don't, then I don't use it. The guitars and harmony and string sections don't have anything too interesting to share about them, except for the fact that on the folder I have the sends just ready to go, and then I can just drag, and like, I'm really fast. Everything is about speed and workflow. So with the vocals, I also have a few parallel channels. I have a parallel using the Blue 1176 with a very slow attack, fast release. This is a channel I usually use for like spittiness, like if I want more you know, sounds, then this will give me that. Then an old school trick that Andrew Sheps really made famous, in which you attenuate the low frequencies, boost the highs, and then compress the bejesus out of this processing, and then boost the lows and attenuate the highs. What happens is that you have a very, very compressed mid-range channel, which keeps your vocal in check regarding the mid-range. This is fun. And in Exciter, this just gives me high frequencies that are shiny and breathy. Again, just an option that I either use or don't use. Then the same long-short reverb, long-short delays, and a widener. All these go to their own stems. We have a different stem for the vocal effects because this is something that sometimes people want in their playback, and again, I'm trying to make my life as easy as possible, so I've just pre-routed that. In theory, these are already the stems. I could have just left the processing to be done on the folders, but I kind of like the fact that things are organized visually and mentally, because when I reach this stage, I'm kind of pre-mastering and I want to approach this differently. Again, I have these disabled plugins for me to use if I need them, and this beautiful plugin by Lindell, which emulates saturation of a Neve console. I got the total harmonic distortion set to a place that I like. All the channels have this kind of mild saturation on them, and also in my final mix bus. There's another instance of it. And here I'll either process or not process the section as a whole before it reaches my 3 mix buses, which we'll get to in a minute. I'm sending audio from all the stems to 2 channels, parallel reverb channel and parallel compression channel. So originally this was set to just decide which one I like better, but I've noticed that all 3 sometimes work great. So I have 2 1176s that are really different in their color and a Fairchild, and I feel like the combination really adds width and RMS. I really like what this is doing. And again, I do go through this intentional process and I bypass and unbypass plugins to just make sure that they are doing what I like. So at a certain point in the mix where I feel like I have my balances right, I'll just insert this slightly and see what it gives me, if it gives something at all. Maybe it's just squishing the mix, maybe it's adding grandeur, I don't know. So it's here ready for me to go. Then I have parallel reverb. Again, everything is disabled, so I go through this search and end up using something that I like. When I have my balance, I choose my reverb. Let's say we'll go with this one. I'll play with the length and the tone and whatnot, and then I'll just take the fader down and slightly raise it to see what effect it has. Sometimes it adds a lot, sometimes it's just not suitable. If you have a song that is very breaky there or a lot of breaks, then you don't want things to reverberate, and sometimes it's exactly what I need. Finally, all these channels are routed to a bus called mix, which these 3 channels have the input of. The first channel is clean from processing, the second has a distressor on it. So I've set this in a way that is very open and it adds width to my mixes. I have a very slow attack, fast release, some saturation, a high pass filter on the detector circuit, and the mix knob is slightly down. This channel usually adds a lot of width to my mixes. I really like what this does, and it was a very strong aha moment when I figured that these 2 work together. The third mix bus has a Fairchild on it and the Omega Transformer model TWK, which from the 3 Omegas is the brightest one. The original mix in which I kind of experimented with and realized that I like this concept, this was the balance that I left it at. I might do some processing on this channel, I might not, but in any case, in every mix I go through a search phase in which I figure out what works best for me. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, parallel processing became something that I'm fascinated with, and maybe this won't be relevant in a month or 2, but for now I'm having a lot of fun. Finally, the whole mix that started with dozens and dozens of channels summing down to folders, summing down to groups, summing down to 3 mix buses, summed down to this channel in which I have the Lindell 80 and a UAD K stereo, which is a fantastic plugin. This is doing nothing currently. It's only open for me to, again, avoid latency stuff, although at this point it doesn't really matter. This is where I can process the mix as a whole if I feel the need to. This is then sent to this channel, which you can notice that the fader is all the way down. The only reason I have this is because when this fader is down, I'm not supposed to hear anything. So if I do hear something, it means that I've left something out of the mix. On this channel, I have a few plugins that are just there because I don't want them to take real estate on my inserts on the print channel. I have the adapter AB in which I insert reference mixes to. Then I have the SBL Hawkeye, which is a pretty cool analyzer with a lot of metering types, and it sometimes helps me just keep things in check. And finally, the mix checker, which just gives me various types of shitboxes to make sure my mix works in various scenarios. So if this was confusing for you, I recommend watching this again, just because there are a few interesting concepts you can explore. If you have any questions, please ask me in the comments below. Subscribe for more cool content, and I'll see you soon.